Boa tarde a todas e todos aqui
Good
presentes
afternoon,
e os que nos
everyone here
acompanham no
with us
YouTube.
today, and also
É
those
nosso
that are
desejo
following
que o
us on
FIB15
YouTube.
contribua com
We
importantes
want
diálogos
FIB
multissetoriais
15
e
to
preparamos tudo
collaborate
para que também
to
seja um momento
multisectorial dialogue,
inesquecível de
and we want it
confraternização de
to
pessoas
be
de todo o Brasil.
a
Antes de
moment
passar a
for people
palavra, a
throughout
moderação
Brazil
para
to meet
iniciar
and
a
that it
sessão
is
principal.
unforgettable.
Lembramos
For
que no momento
our key
certo
session
será
today,
aberta a
we are going to
participação com
have
perguntas
our
ou
panelists, but we are
comentários
also
dirigidos à
going to
mesa.
open for
Quem está
questions at the
presencialmente
end of
aqui
the
em
panel.
Salvador, Bahia,
Those that
pode se
are with
posicionar na
us in
fila
Salvador,
em frente
Bahia,
ao microfone de
can just
pedestal.
stay
Quem
in
está
line for the
remoto
mic.
poderá
And
enviar as suas
those that are
intervenções
watching
pelo
us
chat do
online
YouTube e
can send your
cuidaremos de
questions
encaminhar à
on the
mesa.
YouTube chat, and we are
Acompanhe o
going to
evento
forward them
nas
to the
redes
table.
sociais
You can
do
also follow us on
NIC.br
social
e
media of
divulgue usando a nossa
NIC.br,
hashtag
and you can use
FIB15.
our hashtag
Estamos no YouTube,
FIB15
Facebook,
to talk about the
Instagram,
event. We are on
X,
YouTube,
LinkedIn
Facebook,
e Telegram.
Instagram,
Nessa
LinkedIn,
sessão
and
principal, vai
Telegram.
ter um
And this
palestrante falando
keynote
em
session, we
espanhol.
are going to
Quem
have a
precisar
speaker
do apoio
in Spanish.
da
If
tradução,
you
eu
need
peço que
a
vá aqui
translation,
fora, ao
uh,
lado, para pegar o aparelho. Tudo bem?
just get the
Com nossas
remote
boas-vindas, passamos a
receivers.
palavra à
Um,
moderação.
we are going to now turn to
Olá,
the
pessoal.
moderator.
Boa
Hello,
tarde.
everyone. Good afternoon.
Teremos uma sessão muito
We are going
interessante
to have a
agora à
very
tarde
interesting
sobre
session and
diversos
now this
desafios
afternoon
envolvendo o
about several
multissetorialismo. Mas
challenges
antes da gente começar propriamente a
involving
sessão, eu queria chamar aqui no palco o professor
multi-sectoralism.
Leobino
But before
Sampaio,
we
da
start, I would
SRBC, que
like
vai fazer um
to
anúncio aqui
call
para
to
gente.
stage
Por favor,
Professor
professor.
Leobino Sampaio. Please,
Pode ser.
Professor.
Olá, olá, boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon,
Bom, sou o professor
everyone.
Leobino Sampaio.
I am
Vou
Professor
fazer
Leobino
uma breve
Sampaio,
apresentação
and I'm going to
do
make a
Simpósio
brief
Brasileiro de Redes de
presentation
Computadores que vai
of
ser
the
aqui na
Brazilian
Bahia,
Symposium
na
of
Praia do
Computer
Forte.
Network in Bahia, in
Bom,
Praia do
o
Forte.
Simpósio Brasileiro de Redes,
And the
né,
Brazilian
ele é um
Symposium
evento da
of
SBC, um dos
Networks
maiores
is an event of
eventos na área
SBC, one of the
de redes de
largest
computadores, né,
in
e
the
da
area of
computação.
computer
E tem muitos dos
network
temas
and
que são
computing in
relacionados com isso que a gente
general.
está falando aqui.
And there are many topics that are
Por favor.
related to what we are discussing here.
Eu tenho um passador aqui. Um passador. Quem passa? Bom, antes de qualquer coisa, eu gostaria de agradecer o espaço que foi cedido
Before,
por
I
toda
would like to
a
thank you
organização
for the
do
possibility
evento.
of speaking here in this event today. So
Bom,
thanks to the
falando um pouco de mim,
organizer.
né, eu sou o professor
Well,
Leobino
talking
Sampaio, do
about
Instituto
myself,
de
I'm Leobino
Computação da UFBA.
Sampaio from the
Tá?
Institute of
Já tenho,
Computing of the
vendo o CV que
University
já
of
está há 30
Bahia.
anos aqui, eu já tenho mais
I've
ou menos esse
been
tempo de experiência atuando na área de
in the
infraestrutura de
university
rede,
for
né, da
about
internet.
30 years
E
working
a
with
gente
network
tem alguns projetos de
infrastructure,
pesquisa
and we have
relacionados
some
aqui
research projects
com a RNP, né?
related
E também com o Laboratório de Pesquisa
to
Básica dos Estados Unidos.
NRP and
Alguns dos
also
temas de
the
interesse. Então,
US
falando
basic
do
computing
SBRC, né, o Simpósio
system.
Brasileiro de Rede de
About
Computadores,
the
ele está
SBRC, the
fazendo
Brazilian Symposium
43
of
anos de
Computer
edição. No
Network.
próximo ano, na Bahia, vai ser a
The next
44ª
year in
edição.
Bahia, we
E
are
é um
going to
evento
have
que tem
our
muitos dos temas que estão
fourth
sendo discutidos
year,
aqui
and this is an
durante o
event that
fórum.
has many of
Tá?
the
E
issues that
uma
have been
questão, né, que é
discussed
bem
in this
relacionada,
forum.
né, sempre teve uma
And
relação muito
something
grande com o
that is
CGI,
very close to
diversos
CGI
apoios, né, e os
um,
temas que
the,
são discutidos durante esse simpósio.
are the topics that we
Na
discuss
Bahia,
in the
tá aqui a nossa
symposium.
temática, tá?
In
Então, o
Bahia,
SBRC
we
2026,
are
né, a
going
nossa
to
identidade
talk
visual. E ela vai
about
acontecer durante
communities
um
in
período de
network,
25 a 29
connections
de maio
that
de 2026.
light up the future. This is
Aqui
to
tem a
happen in
organização
May
aqui, vai ser
26th. It is
por
being
duas instituições, o
organized
Instituto
by
Federal
two
da Bahia e a
institutions, the
UFBA,
Federal
e o
Institute
POPBA,
and the
né, que
University
está
of
aqui
Bahia.
representado pelos professores,
These are
a
the
mim e o
general
professor Alain, do IFBA.
coordinators of the class,
As
myself
condições
and
aqui, o
Professor
local de
Alam.
realização será no
This
Centro de
is the
Convenções de
convention
Praia do
center
Forte.
of Praia do
E
Forte.
uma novidade nesse ano é que a gente vai
And
estar em
what's
conjunto
new
com uma
about this
escola
event is
municipal,
that we are
né,
going to
que
be
tem umas condições
working with a
bastante adequadas,
school, a
mas além
local
disso,
school
vai ser um
that
evento que vai ter
has
uma
very nice
integração muito grande
facilities,
com essa
but also
comunidade
we
da
are going to
escola.
have an integration with the school community. So this is a new concept. It's SBRC as a legacy. So the idea is to value local culture, promote social inclusion, and also the digital training of students. The idea is to develop workshops and to be able to connect to students of the community. So this event is going to go beyond the scientific community. We want also to reach students through these actions. So this is what I had to say. I expect to see you next year in 26 in Praia do Forte. We have a booth right at the opening of this event with some material, but you also can reach our page through this QR code. Thank you very much. Very well then, so we are going to start the panel. This is the last keynote session of FIB on Thursday. First, I'd like to thank the help of Loriane and Fábio Wagner for all the support for us to put together this panel. Again, we are going to talk about multi-sectorialism, challenges and opportunities in local and global governance. We are going to have people that are the most knowledgeable talking about the internet governance system globally and also locally. We have specialists in geopolitics. The discussion of multi-sectorialism also has new challenges that involve geopolitical issues. Very briefly, I'm going to say the names of our panelists, and then I'm going to have perhaps a bit longer introduction of each one of them. So to my right, I have Bruna Martins from Witness, that has a BA in law, and in all international events that I go through at CGI, I always meet Bruna, and it's always nice to exchange ideas. To her right, we have Eugênio Antônio Jeremias from INTEC Mozambique, that is going to host the Lusófonos Forum this year, the third forum, and we have high expectations of talking to the people from Mozambique. So Eugênio is going to be able to share a bit with us about the event, but also our relations of the Lusófonos communities about internet governance. And next to Eugênio, I have Alcides Eduardo do Reis Peron from FCA Unicamp. Alcides is always with us, helping us discuss geopolitical issues. He has a BA in International Relations and Economics by FECAMP, and now he's a professor of the University of Campinas. And remotely, we are going to have Jorge Cancio, a co-director of international relations of the Federal Communication Offices Ofcom from Switzerland. And Jorge, once again, is going to speak Spanish. He is going to speak slowly so that everyone can understand him, but we also have simultaneous interpretation if you need that. And finally, Carol Conway. Carol is the president of APRANET's council, and she's also going to talk about the corporate sector and its view on the changes that are going on in the internet governance system and attempts to change it. Many of the attempts we already discussed in past days of this event. So Carol is going to be able to give her excellent opinion about attempts for transformation. It's still not concrete. Very well then, just a brief introduction. I just wanted to comment a bit about the idea that is behind this panel, beyond the description that you have in the agenda, that you can always check on your cell phones. The idea is, on the one hand, talk about the global system that involves entities like ICANN, the WISES Forum, the Rhodes Summit on the Information Society. That is the entity that really gives the mandate to IGF, which is the Global Internet Forum that is held by the UN. So these are all international global forums, and to be able to talk about this global forum is very important, but also considering the Brazilian multi-sectors and the local actions of multi-sector, because we talk a lot about multi-sectorialism, but how it shows, because the principles are always the same. You have a group of sectors that are making decisions by consensus, but how it connects is really the catch. And here in Brazil, we should be very proud about the multi-sector governance system in Brazil. It's very unique, perhaps one of the most democratic in the world. I'm not going to say it is the most democratic because I don't know all initiatives in depth, but it is a system that is always considering an expansion of democracy, but democracy based on principles of multi-sectorialism. I think the Brazilian experience is recognized worldwide, and there are at least two important events that took place with Brazil being the main driver and the host. The two editions of the World Net, which were times to discuss the challenges of multisectorialism. Perhaps Jorge is going to talk a bit further about this, uh, perhaps deep dive in this issue. The last World Forum was room to discuss what defines multi-sectorialism and also what makes it be more democratic, as we all want. What are the conditions that have to be a given for it to be as we desire? And we have also very concrete challenges in this issue that come from the political system. Multisectorialism, and we have to be very candid, has not always been able to have ready to use answers to the questions posed by the internet. And governments and administrations are also making multilateral decisions. So the relationship between multilateralism and multisectoralism is very important. And together with this relation that some believe has to be a bit better balanced, we also have the changes in geopolitics that will also impact this relationship. So we are talking about two ways of addressing internet governance: multisectorial or multilateral, multisectorial with several sectors, multilateral with different countries. But we have geopolitical issues that are not multilateral or multisectorial. They are really authoritarian, and they have effects on the global multilateral system and also on the multi-sectorial system. So it is a lot of complexity to discuss today. So without any further ado, we are going to start with Jorge. So we are going to have Jorge Cancio. Jorge was really crucial for our discussions in the World Net Plus 10. He's a person that is very capable. He's very skilled in negotiations. He's a very skilled negotiator and very much focused on consensus. He works on processes from the UN, ISIS, GDC, and I haven't mentioned this, but it is the Global Pact that is a multilateral initiative that establishes a dialogue with multi-sectorialism. He follows IGF, the European Council, the European Forum. So, Jorge, it's up to you now.
Muchas gracias.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well. I'm going to try and speak slowly. First, I would like to thank the invitation of CGI and the organizers of this event that is so important. It would be lovely to be with you in person in Bahia, but unfortunately, this year we have a very tight calendar as we have several international negotiations, and it was impossible for me to be able to be there. But I hope to soon come to Brazil. I'd like to thank Flávio and Gloria for having organized the panel. And I would like to share with you a few thoughts. As we know, we are living in a hybrid world. We have physical and digital. And we all have, I would say, a double life. Sometimes it's very difficult to distinguish between what is physical and what is virtual. For those of us that are slightly older, this is new. For those that are below 30, this is the world you were born in. And when we talk about 8 trillion people in the world, almost 3 trillion are disconnected still. And this is an aspect that we cannot forget. We are living a world of deep contradictions. Rafael, in his introduction, talked about geopolitical issues, political issues, the relationships between the different countries, and also in between the different regions. This is all a hot topic today. And politics, in its less noble aspect, is also an exercise of power. And amongst the contradictions that we see today, we have huge technological development, particularly digital, with huge possibilities of human development, but on the other hand, controlled by the very few, a reduced number of technological players that are located in some regions of the world. At the same time, this development is accelerating and it demands natural resources that are increasingly higher. And this also, in a way, impacts and jeopardizes our nature and our very existence in this planet. There is a close relationship between technological development and climate change, for example. And finally, we could talk about other things. We also know there is a deep interdependence, culturally, socially, and economically speaking, that involve digital issues. And this is throughout the world. Again, interdependence, and for those that are a bit older, this is very different from what we had 30, 40 years ago. This is today a lot more intense. And as a paradox, we have a political order in terms of governance that is more and more questionable. Even by those that establish the rules. So I would say that, as the Chinese saying goes, we are living quite interesting times, or a world that is at the verge of a crisis, full of dangers and risk, but also possibilities. In digital governance, we could say that we are inserted in these developments, in these issues. When we talk about the control of imports, technologies, components, or controls on supply chains, or even natural resources and end products, also going through key aspects of technology, particularly AI, as in the case of high-speed chips. So all that with the geostrategic components in its military and political groups perform an increasingly important role.
With this group, we develop all the first negotiations, and we start with the preparation of the celebration of 20 years of the Global Summit. Some of us, we also participated in that summit in 2003 and 2005 in Geneva and in Tunis. And I guess that has raised an awareness about the radical change which took place in the digital world lately. Today, digital matters, they are in the geopolitical part. The information society, it was a promising of democratization. And by that, I mean not only political democratization, but also social, informational, data, and knowledge. However, not everything is just fine. One of the systems that had the domain of the summit at that time was internet governance, where we would get that as being a governance of fundamental or critical resources for domain names, as well as IP addresses and some other critical aspects to the development and operation of the networks. At that time, we have reached an agreement in Tunis where we had agreed upon systems of the World Summit of Information Society, which we know by WSIS, that's the acronym in English. And that was the first model, the first global model of what we have named multi-stakeholder or the participation of different parts. However, Brazil has been a pioneer in 1995 with the CGI creation, and internationally speaking, such a model, such a Brazilian advanced model, took a while to follow the development of the Global Forum of Internet Governance with the WSIS Forum, where we perform that Congress or Summit annually, and also with some action lines, some operations conducted by the UN, which is fully dedicated to meet all the developmental aspects in information society from a content perspective, cultural diversity, etc. Such a model, it was not a perfect dream, and one of the issues, it was the governance of the critical resources of the web. That's exactly with the Net Mundial in Brazil in 2014 that represented a push-up in the organization of the governance. Internet corporation governance. So once again, Brazil has developed a pioneer role, extremely important, internationally speaking. In the past years, we have seen how digital effects have grown, also in terms of importance within the UN, which has taken to the negotiation of the Global Digital Pact or Agreement back in 22 and 24. Such an agreement was adopted September last year. As our friend from South Africa has just said, the GDC, the Digital Global Agreement, was a booster. It worked as a booster to push up that legal civil framework that has been achieved during the Global Summit, where new types of agreements about AI, data governance, human resources, machine learning, and despite all these geopolitical issues, some advancements were possible. On the other hand, the Digital Global Agreement has shown that a multilateral project with the little participation from the basis of the several players leads to some sort of agreements that can be considered as a way to add legitimacy for not having been developed throughout a real open and inclusive process. Such a problem, once again, has been identified during the Plus 10 Net Mundial, which was the global Net Plus 10. And one of the main questions asked during this forum was, how can we go deep into the collaboration between all the stakeholders, taking into account the existence of being opening to those contradictions of the current world, especially asymmetries in the power among the several stakeholders. Net Mundial Plus 10, which was held in São Paulo, gave some feedback about the different guidelines from different parts, which was, let's not step backwards to a prior moment where a statistic seems to be just the only efficient system, or any other system that can help us to learn more about existing multi-part collaborations where we can allow open asymmetries in the government, promoting knowledge, and a number of measures that will improve the participation of all stakeholders. Road Net plus 10 or Global Net plus 10 is being an inspiration to improve the negotiation process of the review of the 20 years of the Global Summit of Information Society. All the facilitators, the secretariat, and several countries, they are willing to have a much stronger process, which is more inclusive, where we can address possible results as well as other sustainable measures. Brazil, which has a key role into that process, will make that possible. And it will keep showing to the rest of the world how can we include all the interest sectors. Thank you so much.
Muito obrigado, Jorge. Vou passar
Thank you, Jorge.
agora a palavra para a Bruna. Lembrando que a Bruna tem,
Now I will hand over to Bruna.
além dessa experiência internacional,
And Bruna, in addition to her international experience, she has a very strong involvement. She knows the Brazilian system pretty well, and she understands what are our strengths, our weaknesses, and whatever we still have to improve. Now you have the floor. Thank you. Thanks to CGI for the invitation. It's a great honor to be participating at this wonderful celebration, 30 years of CGI. I have a disclaimer to make. I have been working as an activist in the network, but my professional operation lately, it's more towards this global scene. Europe, governance, internet, global agreements, but never leaving aside the Brazilian overview, which allows us to be in such a pleasant position. I was also a member of Internet Governance Forum organizing department, and I also participated at Addis Ababa, Kyoto last year in Riyadh, and I see some colleagues who also participated, and it's a great honor to be participating at this Internet Forum. I will emphasize my talk on processes, challenges, and outcomes. Process, Information Society, IGF, and Global Digital Compact, and the main processes which are part of these three projects. WISIS, or the Global Summit of Information Society, is a key element to foster a global discussion, multi-stakeholders, and also allows IGF, it grants to IGF as a place to exchange internet policies all over the globe. It's worthwhile mentioning that Information Society Global Summit, where during the Tunis agenda, which has an acceptance of power distribution between multi-stakeholder, but not only, it adds some other action plans, such the ones that were derived from Geneva. Anytime we talk about WISIS, what are the main topics to be discussed and developed together with the ICGs? IGF is a consequence of WISIS, a place where we not only celebrate, but also we can promote Internet Governance Forum, but that is more than a methodology. It's a place where we can exchange, we can listen, we can speak, and this is a room which is being widely developed. We are also celebrating 20 years of IGF, And during this renewal time with the Information Society Global Summit, the renewal of IGF and the renewal of its mandates, and finally Global Digital Compact, which replicates the time we are living. Countries trying to give answers to this discontrolled technological advancement to include specific players into the digital platforms, big techs, and so on, and the damage that users have been affected from. The GDC is a robust document, but despite being managed at the UN, which is a place that agreed with a multi-sectorial model, GDC does not consider the validity of multi-sectorial approach and to listen to different players, to different stakeholders. We have some discussion webinars, but always with some limited perspective. The civil society does not have a strong voice, neither other sectors. And the technical community was not considered as participants of this scenario. As to challenges, we have a clear conflict between multilateralism and multi-stakeholder. As countries, they want to offer regulatory responses. They might have not enough time to listen to the agencies or entities, and we advocate for that as being a solution, but they also add some challenges, different perspectives, ideas, and opinions. Another challenge would be efforts without any coordination. Just to mention one regulatory event, Brazil has been discussing its model, so did Europe and other countries in the world much. They are trying to implement, but not much about coordination is spoken. There is no coordination. We might see they advocating for one or two models at most. The first model to be served in, and in cases like that, we are discussing much more digital services compact from the European Union than any other solutions such as the Latin American or Caribbean. In addition, I would like to talk about power symmetries. In the UN, we see that as geopolitical debates, and there are countries that speak much louder than others. By the end of the day, in a nutshell, geopolitical divergences between the United States, China, Russia. So this power asymmetry takes some global South countries into some sort of a restraint where not all protocols are able to be developed as they don't have a strong voice. And to close, some of the sectors where we work with, such as ICANN, Telco, ITF, several forums like those, they relate differently to the internet, but there is not one single collective line about all those sectors, as each one of them try to meet a different definition of what internet can or could be. So we might be dealing with the sectors that have theme gaps and less institutional involvement. UN is a place where IGF has been designed and created as a consequence of the Digital Global Compact. And it's very clear that there was a clear need of the member states to follow a new approach, which would put aside the historical development after 20 years of operations throughout the Internet Forum and any others. Institutional fragmentation is key, especially if we are talking about governance areas, the fragmentation of the discussion, and the importance that all sectors will talk among them. How about answers? If we keep relevant room for discussion, a possible fragmentation would be to expand the scope of the discussion, which FIB might be getting here is digital collaboration, digital governance, but that goes much beyond that. We are no longer disputing what internet is, how can we talk about internet? We are in another level of this discussion. And moreover, digital governance or internet governance should take a more granular sight to human rights. Some of those topics, they are not considered as they should due to diplomatic agreements, which are part of the UN setting. Inclusion of Global South voices is key. And once again, I would like to highlight that it's wonderful to see the level of FIB's diversities. I remember a few years ago when we were together with the CGI advisors, and André, this guy, asked them, why do we have just a FIB full of white men? Why don't we have a diversity? And now we have much more diversity. Now we are talking about Brazil and no longer that pasteurizer type of approach that some debates usually and unfortunately they follow. And I think that's it. Multi-stakeholder guidelines, this is the main result of Net Mundial Plus 10, because this is a framework which talks about fair transparency with equity, where everyone has a voice and not just who have power, money, or who participated for many years at this process. The World Net or Net Mundial, it's always after diversity and greater participation of all. We need more coordination. We have seen a huge fragmentation at different sectors of the debate, and that may be my own bias, but I didn't see enough platform representatives participating at this forum, and also the absence of the private sector, which should be included in this debate. This is a call where everyone should be participating and be part of the discussion. So we are in a deadlock. The debates have progressed, developed. We live a reality nowadays which will be challenged by other realities or parallel ones. And now internet governance should step down from its diplomatic level and become more real, communicating to the youth, representatives from all over, not only in this country, but globally. Brazil can be a leader in this discussion. CGI has been of great help, not just due to its model, but to the involvement of youth in this discussion. And here I have people who had inspired myself, and I'm sure that we youngsters, we may become leaders in the future. Net Mundial plus 40, who knows? That's it. Thank you.
Obrigado, Bruna, e obrigado pela lembrança. Eu acho que dessa.
Thanks, Bruna. Thanks for remind us about the change. I thought it was a very relevant comment, and it has to do with an important item that is in our guidelines that came out of Net Mundial Plus 10, which is the asymmetries in participation. Sometimes we talk about multi-sectorialism, how we have all the sectors equal, but they are not in terms of power.
As instituições do multisetorialismo precisam ajudar os setores a se municiar, a entender melhor o debate e a promover a inclusão.
So that we can involve inclusion and have representativity and knowledge about how things work so that it can be
acontecer
a
de
lot more
verdade, não ser
effective. That
só
is, it can
uma coisa
be
para mostrar,
called
né?
real
Ela precisa seguir e
participation and
produzir.
not
E
just
muito obrigado por
participation
lembrar
to
da
show.
coordenação, porque daí você
And
vai me dar um
thank you
gancho
for
para eu
talking about
falar com o
coordination as
Eugênio
well, because
sobre
I think this is
o
the
Eugênio
perfect time
que
for
é
us to
mestre,
talk to
engenheiro
Eugênio.
de
He has a
redes e sistemas de
master's
comunicação,
in
está envolvido
network
num
engineering and
processo de
communication
transformação
systems.
digital de
He is involved in
Moçambique,
the
e
digital
Moçambique agora vai
transformation
sediar
system of
o Fórum
Mozambique, who is now going
Lusófono
to
de
host
Internet,
the
que é um esforço
Lusófonos Internet
de
Forum,
coordenação
an
entre os
effort
países
of
lusófonos, né,
coordination
entendendo que
in
até,
between
não sei se o Weber está
Portuguese-speaking
aqui, mas se o
countries. I
Weber
don't know if
estiver aqui,
Weber
eu
is
queria
here,
agradecê-lo por ter
but
sido
if
um
you are,
conselheiro que
I'd
foi
like to thank you, Weber,
fundamental de trazer a
because
ideia
it
de,
was
isso,
really
vamos bater palmas
crucial
para o Weber.
to bring, yeah, Weber is
Eu sei
here.
que está aqui, mas
Let's
senão eles
have a
entenderão
hand
onde
to
estiver.
Weber.
Mas que
Whoever
foi
you are, wherever
fundamental
you are,
para
your
puxar
initiative
isso
was really
sobre a
paramount
possibilidade de
for us
articulação entre os
to
países
start talking
lusófonos.
about an
O último
articulation
Fórum Lusófono
in
foi
between
em Cabo
Portuguese-speaking
Verde
countries. The last
e a gente
forum
discute tanto
was in
plataforma, plataforma,
Cape
plataforma.
Verde,
Acho que a
and we are
maior
always
plataforma de entendimento que
discussing
a gente tem é a
platforms.
língua.
I
E
think
por mais que a gente seja
language is
diverso
our
culturalmente,
greatest
ainda que
platform of
tenhamos
understanding.
proximidades,
Of course, we
inclusive
are
produzidas pela
diverse.
língua,
We have
a
similarities, including
plataforma
the
é um
language, but we
grande
are
lugar de
diverse.
contato
But
dessa
this is a
diversidade cultural
platform for
dos
us
países
to
lusófonos. Para mim
meet
foi
the cultural
muito
diversity
inspirador e eu acho
of
que estou muito ansioso por
Portuguese-speaking
Moçambique.
countries. So
Mas
I'm
estou falando
very
demais, Eugênio, por
looking
favor.
forward to
Muito obrigado, Roberto,
Mozambique.
pela palavra.
Good
Muito boa tarde
morning.
a todos.
Thank you.
Boa tarde a
Good
todas.
afternoon, everyone.
Primeiro, quero agradecer ao
First, I'd
convite,
like to thank the
de
invitation
e também felicitar a
and
participação dos 30
also
anos do CGI
congratulate the
acontecendo,
30
implementando
years
a
of
internet no Brasil.
CGI.
Esse que é essa celebração.
It's a very
E
nice
também
initiative.
dizer que sinto-me bastante
And
honrado
also
de fazer parte
say
deste
that
painel
I'm very
bastante
honored
relevante
to be part
na
of
governação,
this
no entanto,
panel
da
that is
internet.
so relevant
E
when
de seguida
discussing
eu vou
internet
passar, no entanto,
governance.
a minha
So
apresentação
now I'm going
e vai
to
tratar, no
go
entanto,
to
das
my
perspectivas de
presentation
cooperação
that
da
is going
comunidade
to
lusófona
talk about
para influenciar
possibilities
os
of
processos globais
cooperation
e
in
olhando também
Portuguese-speaking
para o
countries,
compartilhar do processo de
thinking
governação
of
da internet global
global
em
issues,
Moçambique.
but also local internet issues, in this case
Então,
of
essa é a estrutura da minha
Mozambique.
apresentação. Vou
This
passar
is my
rapidamente, me
presentation.
referindo
I'm
à
going to go
introdução,
through um,
dizer que a questão de disputas
briefly just to talk
geopolíticas
about an
sobre o controle de
introduction.
informação e
Uh,
gestão e
uh,
infraestrutura tecnológica é
we
tema que foi bastante
have
aflorado
to
nos dois
discuss
painéis aqui neste fórum que
geopolitical
tive a oportunidade de
issues
acompanhar.
on the control of
No entanto,
information and digital structure.
torna-se
We have
urgente
talked about
pensar como países
this in
lusófonos
this forum.
poder
So, as
atuar de forma
Portuguese-speaking countries,
colaborativa,
we have to be able to
defendendo, no
work
entanto,
in
princípios como inclusão
cooperation,
digital, soberania
defending
digital,
principles like
segurança
digital
cibernética e
inclusion,
respeito dos
digital
direitos humanos e
sovereignty,
online e os fóruns globais e
cybersecurity, and respect to human rights. And the World Forum have a
Campruna,
crucial
digamos que esse é o
role
nome que fez
uh,
referência,
uh,
desempenha,
uh,
no entanto, um papel
in
crucial na
this
promoção da cooperação global,
promotion of
aspectos
global
relacionados à sociedade da
cooperation
informação
and
e
aspects related
governança
to
da
the
internet.
information society
Em
and
seguida, vou
internet
partilhar aqui algumas
governance.
competências do
Here
Instituto
I'm
Nacional
going
de
to share
Telecomunicação e
with
Comunicação, que
you
é a instituição que aqui
the main
represento.
competences of
No
the
entanto,
National
implica é
Institute
regulador
of
de TICs
Technology,
em
Information
Moçambique
Technology and
e tem
Communication
como
in
principais
Mozambique.
atribuições
That is
propor e
called
apresentar
INTIC.
regulamentos e outros
Basically,
diplomas
it
legais,
proposes
assim como
rules
divulgar
and legal
e
bills,
promover a
and
aplicação
also
das transações
the
eletrônicas, do
application
comércio
of
eletrônico, assim como do
electronic
governo em Moçambique.
transactions,
E também tem
electronic
uma atribuição
commerce,
importante que
and
é a implementação do sistema de
electronic
certificação digital,
government sites.
que é
And
um elemento
also it
bastante
works
essencial
with the digital
para a
systems,
segurança
which is
da
a
internet
crucial element
e também
for
propõe um quadro
internet
legal de
security.
proteção de
And
dados
also it
e
wants to
combate
propose
a
a
cibercrimes
legal
e
framework
também realizar
for the
estudos de
protection
arquivos de
of
informação
personal
e também,
data
no entanto, da
and
gestão do
combat
domínio em
against
dezembro.
cyber crimes. This slide shows the legal framework that has been approved in Mozambique. Again, we have the electronic transactions law, which is the umbrella law in Mozambique that, in a way, gave light to several other regulations. And we can see we have in Mozambique a set of rules for the regulation of the internet, including interoperability, digital certification, policies for information society, the strategic plan for information society, the rule for the scientific repository, the use of dominions, and also the national policy of cybersecurity and the strategy for internet implementation. In terms of other regulations that are under elaboration, we understand that we still have to have other legal instruments. We are working with the law of cybersecurity, the law of cybercrimes, data protection, access and use to a centralized system, and also important strategies for the development of digital strategies. This is something that we are still preparing for this year. Also, the national strategy for AI, which is a topic that is very much discussed currently. And here we have the legal framework in terms of instruments that have already been adopted in Mozambique. In 19, we ratified the Convention of the African Union about cybersecurity and data protection, the letter of the Community of Portuguese-speaking countries of rights and digital principles, Mozambique signed in 2023, again, talking about all countries, Portuguese-speaking countries, and Mozambique is in the process to join the Budapest Convention for mutual and cooperation in the fight against cyber crimes. We are about to sign the convention, and we are already participating as an observer since April 2024. And finally, but certainly not less important, Mozambique had an active role in the Convention of the UN against cybercrime. In the recently assembly of the UN in December 24, we had the resolution passed, and we expect to ratify it this year. As for possible cooperation with Portuguese-speaking countries, I think this is a key area for us to discuss digital sovereignty, human rights, and cybersecurity and socio-economic development. The Lusófonos community can work as a multilateral bloc to defend an open, inclusive, safe internet that is centered on human beings. And the cooperation of the Lusófonos community is essential for a coordinated action in forums like the WSIS, IGF, ICANN, and in the UN debates. With that, we have a collective voice, and we can work in diplomacy to defend multisectorialism, internet governance, best practices and the development of capacities. And we have challenges and opportunities to really make through both the visions of WSIS and IGF. Current trends and emerging technologies are a potential, but there are challenges for us to meet the vision of both WSIS and the Lusophonous community. We have opportunities, that is, to define priorities, to promote the Portuguese language on the internet, innovation and technological development, and also the exchange of experience and training in between in Portuguese-speaking countries. In terms of challenges, we have low levels of digital training, especially in African countries, very low investment in tech infrastructures, and regulation of emerging technologies. And now I'd like to talk about activities that we have in Mozambique. We have national forums that have been held since 2022. In 23, we already had several forums at local and national level. And in May, we had the fourth edition of the National Internet Regulation Forum and also the third edition of the Youth Forum. That was also a hybrid session, and we had 270 participants. And here are some of the developments that we had in terms of local internet governance. We have the Observatory of the Information Society that is very important, that was recently published in January 25. We had the support of CGI.br, and we also have a book that was published talking about the state of art of internet in Mozambique. As for cybersecurity, I'd like to mention, just to close my presentation, when we talk about cybersecurity, it is a very important component in the prevention of cyber crimes. We have our national website, and that enables us to sign electronic documents in Mozambique. And we also have this very important development, which is the in the Global Cybersecurity Index for 2024 of ITU. Mozambique showed an upgrade showing the country's commitment to have cyber security. However, the report still recommends the country to engage more in this area to have a better rating. Well, to conclude, internet governance is one of the strategic areas of geopolitics and international regulation. The cooperation between Portuguese-speaking countries is strategic. We can inspire in the Brazilian governance model. We recognize and we think it is a model that is very important based on CGI.br. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Muito obrigado, Eugênio.
Thanks, Eugênio. I think it is really impressive, the amount of activity that is going on in Mozambique. I'm very curious to know the developments, but I think we have very good signs that we are going to have a wonderful forum. And you stuck to 12 minutes. I really appreciate that. That was really impressive. Now I'm going to turn to Carol Conway. In addition to being the president of ABRANET, Carol has had very important work in the UN Global Pact. She works with women in the UN. She works with podcasts. She is also the leader of a program called Diversity in Council. So, Carol, it's up to you. And I'd like you to talk about the effects of possible changes and regulations in the internet governance model, especially Rule 4, which is one of the subjects of concern, because it seems to me that Norm 4 was responsible for producing a very diverse internet, not in terms of diversity of races, but diversity of businesses that is against concentration. Carol?
Sou eu e a Branete que agradecemos. Boa
Well,
tarde,
on behalf
Rafael,
of
todos os meus
Abranet and
colegas.
myself, I'd like
Eu
to
gostaria
thank you
muito
all
de ter
and greet my
podido
dear
estar aí
colleagues. I
presencialmente
wish I
em
could
Salvador,
be on
mas
site
infelizmente ou
with all of you. I
felizmente,
would love
graças
to
à
be
nossa
in
internet,
Salvador
porque se não fosse
City,
isso eu não teria
but
conseguido
fortunately
participar.
and
Eu não
thanks
pude
to
estar aí
our internet,
presencialmente.
here I
Quero
am with
aproveitar que
you
eu
despite
estou
not be
vendo com os
on
olhos, mas com
site.
certeza quem está aí está na companhia de
I believe
pessoas que eu
that
admiro demais e quero
we
parabenizar
in
também o pessoal da
the
sua
audience,
corporação,
I
Renato,
have dear
professor
friends and
Gleiser,
people who I
Demi,
admire,
sintam-se todos
such
os
as
colegas do
Renato, Professor
CGI, todos
Gleiser,
que foram aí
Demi, all my
cumprimentados
friends from
nas sessões
CGI.
deles e de vocês.
Feel my
Bom, você citou um pouquinho aí
my
além
greet to all of
da
you.
presidência do Conselho da
In
Abranet, né?
addition
Só
to the
para
presidents
quem
of
não
Abranet's
vive aí na geografia
steering
brasileira, a Abranet
committee,
surge
Abranet
junto
is
com, na época
an
do grupo
entity
gestor, na época
which
da norma
was
4,
created
justamente
during
para
Norm 4
amparar
together
e
with the
apoiar
steering
os
committee,
serviços de
where
internet no
they
país,
aim to
o que nós
support
entendemos que
internet
tem dado muito
services in
certo,
this
né?
country.
Tanto
And so
pela
far,
escolha do
that has
estabelecimento
been
do
very
CGI como norma
effective.
4,
Thanks to the
como a
norm
própria
number
Abranet
4,
estabelece.
CGI,
Hoje nós temos
Abranet itself.
representantes de
Today we
muitos
have
setores, não daria para citar todos
representatives from
aqui,
different
mas eu
sectors.
destacaria o setor de
I
conexão, o
would like
setor
to
de
highlight
conteúdo para a
connection,
internet, toda a
content,
parte de data
internet
centers
content,
e
the whole data
fintechs. A
centers
Abranet é
and
extremamente
fintechs.
protagonista na
Abranet
redução de
plays a very
evasões e
important
radicalização
role
no
in
país,
the
e nada
in
disso
the
seria
digital
possível sem
and
a existência
financial
do
revolution
CGI,
in
da
this
Lei
country.
Qualidade de
And
Rede, do
that
Marco
was just
Civil,
possible
desses
thanks to
diplomas
network
regulatórios, dos diplomas de
neutrality,
debate
the
previstos no
civil
marco
frame, legal
multilateralismo.
framework,
E,
and the whole CGI
particularmente, você citou a
support.
questão de governança, então eu vou pegar
Governance
esse
has been
gancho
raised
para
here.
dizer que
So I will start my
o meu olhar
talk
ele vem
starting
sobre,
from
seja a norma
this
4 ou sobre o
governance
multilateralismo, em
side.
torno da minha experiência, que é a
Norm
experiência com
for
governança,
multi-stakeholder
principalmente
and my
governança
experience
corporativa.
with the
E quero
cooperative
parabenizar também
governance.
pelo
And I
debate,
also
pelo
like to
título,
greet
porque quando eu
the
li
sessions
eu lembrei
topic.
na hora do quanto a governança corporativa, e vamos
I
lembrar que a
know
internet
at what extent
é a meta-corporação, né? É a
cooperative
corporação das
governance
corporações. É hoje
is
a true
important.
corporation,
And this
né? A
is the true
companhia sem
corporation.
um
I mean,
detentor,
a
um
company with
controlador
not
único,
one
é a
single
maior do mundo,
domain
né?
or
E
with
tem
one single
muitas
domain, that is the
corporações que
largest one.
apoiam sobre
As
ela,
many
muitas pessoas
corporations,
físicas se
they
apoiam sobre ela,
rely
e ela
on
nasce nas
them,
universidades,
and
né, no
that was
ambiente
raised
acadêmico, e
in
depois ela
the
se expande de
academic
forma
setting,
distribuída. Então,
and it
para mim, o melhor
expands
exemplo
widely.
é dizer que
And
ela
the
é a
best
maior true
example is to
corporation do
say that
mundo,
that
né? Um
is the
modelo
largest
bastante
true
visado
corporation
por
in the
todas as
world,
empresas
a
que
model
já
which is
se empenham aí
pursued
no caminhar
and
da
wants to be
governança
replicated by
corporativa.
many companies who
E
are
lembrei também do mito
within
de
this
Narciso,
pathway.
né?
And I remember the
Narciso foi
Narciso
aquele
myth.
que acabou
Narcisse
morrendo
was the
porque
guy
ele só
who
olhava para
ended up
si e
dying
não
because he would
conseguia olhar
just
ao
look at
redor.
himself
E a
and he
governança ela
would
vem
not
muito, e
take a
esse
look
debate vem muito para
around
não
him.
deixar que a
And the
governança que nós
debate of
temos na
governance is
internet, por mais que
exactly
seja
has that similarity
maravilhosa,
with the
tenha colocado a
Narciso.
maior true
Despite our
corporation em
internet
pé,
being
que é a
wonderful
internet, né?
and being
Toda essa
able to
distribuição,
bring
ou mesmo tenha
the
produzido
true corporation
diversos
internet,
dispositivos
and
para que ela
also
não
due
morra,
to a
né?
number of
E nos
effective
conselhos nós chamamos isso de
results, governance, we should not die. I mean, the governance should not die. Governance should have a 360 sight to understand what were the weaknesses, the strengths, and how can we learn from our mistakes and how can we keep growing. So in our 360 assessment,
se deu certo ter uma governança,
if it was worthwhile, or if this internet governance target was successful, was able to have representatives from the government side, from the civil society, business people, or if we should get back to that old model of command and control, when you have someone that will grant an agency or a government will decide by itself what is taking place in the web. And the most strategic question is trying to answer this question. If someone believes that the command and control over the internet, if that is more important than governance, if internet should get back to be controlled by someone, and I have the feeling that no, not quite. The telco agencies, regulatory data bodies, regulatory sectors, commerce, entrepreneur, they are all part of internet governance, and they have to manage the competence matrix, as we call, because all these different understandings, they are key to allow a positive strength balance where we'll be able to advance more and more and not destroy or going backwards to one or another voice. So from a format perspective, existence of a governance, I understand that we cannot go back to the old control and command model. That may sound silly, a dystopia, but if we consider macro political scenarios and all this questioning that the internet is suffering, but this point is key, as well as the corporations. What we see is that the family companies nowadays, that they are not obliged to have established involvement. It is proved that a family company which establishes a governance may reach the third and the fourth and fifth generation, and those without governance, they around 50% of them, they end up dying in the first generations. That's not exactly what we are willing to the internet, or if the corporation like the web will benefit from this. In addition, I agree that FIB's team, IGF team, has a lot to add to what I'm going to say, which are the decisory process, mandates, efficacy, decision-making, to have a quick participation with the required speech, such as artificial intelligence, quantum and physics, if that may be improved at all. And that is a key discussion to allow speed and support to the society as a whole and the governments. And I wonder if the governance process is still on track. This is a insight which I would like to leave for further discussion and food for thought. And in any type of modern digital sustainable governance, we have to emphasize SEG. And I know that E is for environmental, ESG. E stands for environmental, sustainability and governance, but we believe that this is a environmental department duty, but not quite, because internet is part of that scenario. Brazil is responsible for 30% of the whole energy matrix in the globe, and that topic should be part of governance. Green and sustainable AI. How can Brazil be able to collaborate to reach such a sustainable balance in addition to governance, which is the G letter for ESG? But let's not forget about ethics. At what extent do we have to debate upon ethical recommendations throughout the use of AI and all this set of new technologies which emerge? Someone has mentioned the role of internet. Internet is all, is everything.
Provocação, mas também debate sobre essas decisões.
And I'd like to raise that aspect as a polemic topic for further debate. And regarding norm number 4, that also goes through a reaction of the community, saying that is not to, if we don't agree on a norm, that's not what is going to impair the governance power that we have in the web. A management, one cannot interrupt a process, and that if they want to interrupt the governance to which we all make part, if someone they want to overrule, better saying, and despite we do not agree, if we rescind a decision like that, that is not going to be ideal. And internet governance is active and in place. So if they withdraw it, it doesn't sound as a good idea. In addition, we have to reflect upon this governance and what's the role of that governance in the regulatory framework. No other regulatory matter may not include multi-stakeholder governance, as if each one would be taking isolated decisions. But CGI, in our perspective and in Abranet's perspective, that is present and should be even more present in each one of the regulatory decisions, by written norms or by any voluntary movement of the community, because the CGI is the governance of all internet governances, and we believe that it will perform such a role. And we as communities, all of us, advisors, CGI, all this position is much greater than simply one certain entity over a certain perspective will bump into internet governance. I see that as being somewhat invalid. Another aspect which I would like to set here as to the regulatory aspects is also a governance aspect, which is we have to understand what are the existing benefits to shareholders. And here I mean shareholders of each one of the companies, but not only. How about stakeholders, which are essentially our users? This is another balance that a modern digital governance should pursue in our vision. I know that has already been done, but let me just emphasize it's important. At what extent shareholders and stakeholders are finding an even balance in the level of benefits and liabilities, because there is not just one responsible to many benefits. We all have to be responsible, and we all have to balance and follow all these benefits with some level of equity. So my final message is this governance is greatest than any other unilateral decisions. Any sort of regulation should include the CGI role as a consultative advocacy role or as a supportive agency, and Abranet is at your disposal, so we can go on with this discussion. And let me thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you.
Gente, vou aproveitar as diversas provocações
there were so many inputs given by Carol, and again, start thinking of questions that you may have to our panel, comments, but now I'm going to turn to our last speaker. And for those of you that are online, you can also ask your questions. You just send them on the YouTube chat so that we can have a very profitable debate. So, Alcides, I think you now will be able to help us think beyond governance. So the relationship of multilateral, multisectorial, and unilateral, some more powerful countries trying to make their will come true without interacting with other countries, trying to punish others for exerting their sovereignty. So, Alcides, well, thanks, Rafael. Now it's time to talk about disaster. First of all, I'd like to wish you good afternoon. I thank you for being here. Congratulations to CGI for its 30 years. It's a very important story. This is my first FIB, and I'm very happy to be here. I thank the technical support people and the organizers and the invitation. Dear panelists, participants here and online. So let's talk about the major tensions that we are having globally. We always, think about what we are going to say, but I decided to capture some of the problems, some of the tensions that were raised in the talks before me. Of course, I'm not going to be able to summarize everything, but it's very important to address some of the points that were raised. So my objective is to discuss three things with you. Things that, in a way, connect to each other and have to do with multilateralism, multisectorialism, and digital sovereignty. Is it possible to think about global governance in a world in which potencies recognize internet, AI as a resource of power? And in view of what we are experiencing now, and here I'm going to refer to Carol from Abranet, which is the global interregnum, can we develop an idea of digital sovereignty? And is digital sovereignty nationalization and fragmentation of cooperation? Are we before an idea of hyper centralization, or what Carol mentioned, command and control? I think that this all talks to each other. We have to think of these issues in a world in transition, a world that is living an interbrain. And if we think of Grant's face, the old is dead. The old rule is dead, but the new has not been born yet. We are in a very complex transition, mate. We do not have a pre-established international order. There are arrangements of what we call a tricolor rule. And here I'm looking at foreign affairs. This is this week's issue. And are we before a committee to run the world? So you have Trump, Xi Jinping, and Putin on the cover. The cover, you know, represents a series of problems that are vocalized in several ways. When you consider Donald Trump, he mentioned McKinley, a US president in the turn of the 19th to 20th century that announced protectionist measures and a way of renationalizing American power by tariffs, closure, and offshore balance. That is, the United States retreating from the world. They read Frederick Hatzel that divided the world in 10 regions and countries that could rule on a set of countries. And this is something that we are seeing, zones of influence, but also a constant dispute for strategic resources. And strategic resources are basically allocated as the base of power in the 21st century, that is, digital resources. So, the interregnums is a set of conflicts and tensions, and we see Gaza, Ukraine, we see a series of interventions. And beyond that, you have disputes and tensions that happen in all layers of digital infrastructure, social cognition, logic, everything is being disputed. And in terms of power, they all reflect what these states are looking for. So you have disputes in technical standards committees. China is trying to stand up disputes for 5G, primary resources that are important for the production of technical resources, and disputes that can lead to military tensions, like the siege of Taiwan and its strategic importance for China. And all that, again, meaning a global dispute for the control of digital resources. So basically, the idea is to have a centralized management that is hyper-centralization or command and control over digital resources. If we look at what China, Russia, and the US are doing, we see a centralization of power in few agencies that can remove some online groups or make online interventions. Rodenberg and Steve Felsen are authors that I really like, and they are talking about digital repression. And in these three countries, you have digital repression policies, the arbitrary use of the internet against activists, lawyers, the academia, and you also use digital as a policy of dissuasion. And with that, we have a threat to digital sovereignty. So when you look at this model, you see the importance of the state to make investments, but it's a fine line between the state and the oligarchies that are part of the state to be empowered. Now, the direct effects of this hypercentralization can be felt by several countries worldwide. As a professor of geopolitics, I have to bring maps. And here in blue, we have countries that already have artificial intelligence strategies, in orange that have not, and others that are under development. And you have some information here that is extra information. If you consider the digital hypercentralization, we see what is left for countries in the South Cone. Several activities in AI that are lesser, if you think. Hypercategorization, in some countries, the manufacturing and design of microchips. So this type of centralization has a huge trend to have these potencies stand out, and also places us in a series of tensions that have been addressed here, like mining in protection lands, indigenous lands, pollution with the idea of bringing data centers here, the import of pollution, and other tensions that come with environmental tensions. So when you talk about climate justice, pollution is translated as a conflict. So this whole set of tensions brings me to this slide, which I think is very interesting for this panel. When we talk about global governance, we talk about a reaction to several decaying models of tensions of an expansion of empires, unilateral power. For years, and along the history of CGI and other agencies that are so important in multilateral regulation, attempts of centralization were barred by cooperated actions. Multisectorialism brings checks and balances to try and minimize hypercentralization. This has been very beneficial for us to have a good balance between autonomy and sovereignty. It is a very successful model. And in several examples in history, we could see how the work of different sectors, corporations, governments, and academia ensured what we can really call sovereignty. Now, if we think of what has been going on in the world recently, when we reflect on sovereignty, we think of a traditionalist view, which is a centralized model that is impositive of national security. But in the same model of centralization, you are seeking for autonomy. So sometimes it's very difficult for you to work with centralization and guarantee freedoms which come from sovereignty. So this topic has been discussed in history for many, many times during the operations of peace from the United States. They were always talking about sovereignty as freedom. And here we can start talking about multisectorialism and sovereignty. Sovereignty cannot be isolated. It's not individual. If we think it's individual, we would consider China, the United States, and Russia alone. Sovereignty is a unifying, cooperated action. And for that, you need multilateralism and multisectoralism. Sovereignty is always a cooperation. And we had major advances when we were talking about the 70s, for instance, freedom, non-alignment produced by Nasser in Egypt, Nehru in Niger, and Joseph in Yugoslavia, produced a movement of non-alignment to forms that were perverse in the time. Thinking about the 21st century, digital became a central topic. So we should think about how we can work managing sovereignty in a multilateralism and multisectoralism approach. I thank you very much for giving me the possibility to join this panel, and I'm open for your questions. Thank you. Okay, so now we are going to open for questions. I see people that are lining up for the questions. So we are going to have 3 questions and then the answers. I don't think we have anything online yet, but we are going to that. We are going to take 3 questions and then we are going to have the answers. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for this panel. I think there were very important contributions from this panel. And this panel talks about the importance and the multi-sectorial aspect of the internet. Carol said it very well, and so did Professor Alcides. We have to start thinking about the legality of the revocation of a public policy that was established in 95 by the Ministries of Communication and Science Technology, when 2 ordinances were published in May in 95 with Norm 4 that to basically conceptualize what a value-added service is, making a difference between these services and communication services, and also the ordinance that established CGI to talk about the strategic guidelines for the development of internet in Brazil. This division between telecommunications and added valued services was consolidated by the General Telecommunications Law. The relationship between providers of the different services have been regulated by Anatel, but I'm sorry, and more. In 2014, with the civil framework, internet governments in Brazil consolidated the stand of CGI. It talks about public powers in internet governance, and it refers specifically to the legal framework. So I would like to talk about the legality of Anatel revoking a public policy that is defined by the executive power. Anatel, by law, should not design policies, but rather implement policies. So we have an autarky revoking a public policy that has been consolidated for many years. And in addition, to address a topic that is not under its scope because internet is not telecommunications, according to Norm 4 that Anatel wants to revoke and what is written in the National Telecommunications Law. And I would like you to talk about the horrible effects that we are going to have based on that to try and guarantee what we need to build with the scenarios that we have ahead of us, such as artificial intelligence and the building of data centers. Thank you very much.
Oi, gente, boa tarde. André
Hello,
Fernandes
good
aqui, diretor
afternoon.
do
I'm
Instituto de
André
Pesquisa e Tecnologia
Fernandes,
do Recife.
Director of
Eu
the
queria fazer
Institute
uma contribuição ao
of
debate da mesa.
Research of
Eu gostaria de reforçar que
Recife.
os desafios do
I'd like to
multissetorialismo e seus
comment
limites ainda
that
são
the
muito grandes
challenges
e nos
of
demandam coragem,
multisectorialism are
especialmente em um
huge
contexto em que se fortalece a
and
narrativa
demand
multissetorial
courage,
por agentes dos
especially in
governos, como
this
a gente viu aqui
context
no FIB
that we
comum,
have
como uma espécie de bala de
now
prata, implicando na
a
diminuição do
speech
espaço
of
multissetorial.
multilateralism
Desde
from
2015, que é quando eu me
the
aproximei desse
different
ecossistema, eu percebo e
administrations.
analiso grandes
Since
pesquisadores e ativistas que
2015,
falam do
I have
multissetorialismo.
seen
E eu gosto
several
sempre de recordar uma fala da
activists
professora
talking
Árvore
about
Dória, no IGF de João
multisectorialism.
Pessoa, de
And I'd
2015,
like
para
to
o qual existe
mention
uma
a
tensão
professor
inerente
that
entre os setores do
mentioned
multissetorialismo
this in
e que uma aproximação
2017,
ingênua ao esquema e a
talking
essa
about the
governança pode,
pressure
na
we're
verdade,
having
reificar
on
as relações e
multisectorialism
substancializá-las de forma
and
artificial.
basically
A
the
gente hoje
threat
chamaria
that
isso de
we have for the
tokenizar.
future,
Eu
what
agradeço
we
muito
would
a menção
call
feita pela colega
tokenization
Bruna e, de
today.
fato, o FIB
I
ampliou
thank
seu espectro, mas
Bruna
isso não quer dizer,
saying
eu
that
gostaria de poder
FIB has
adicionar, que o
expanded its
multissetorialismo,
scope,
esta
but
comunidade, vem tratando essas tensões.
multisectorialism is
Inclusive, o
still
estudo e prática
something
do
that
termo
has
tem
to be
servido de todo tipo de
addressed.
malabarismo
And
retórico e simulacro de participação
even, the
significativa.
discussion of
Nunca foi um
what
tema
it
sem
is.
tensões,
It
mas essas
has
tensões nos
never
ajudam a
been
avançar num
a
contexto em que
topic
o setor de
without
inovação, por
tensions,
exemplo,
but
faz propaganda
tensions
de um
are
IA
important
verde
for
e data
us
center
to
ecológico, um debate que
analyze.
oculta a realidade de
People are
exploração de
talking
inúmeros mares
about
e territórios como a
green
Amazônia brasileira
data
e o Congo
centers,
africano.
but
Nesse
forget
sentido, há
that
algo na
we are
tecnologia que nós não queremos
exploring
ver. É quando
resources
termos como
in the Amazon
multissetorialismo,
and
nuvem e
in Congo.
congêneres
So
escondem que muito do
we
desenvolvimento tecnológico
see
está
that much
lubrificado
of
em
the
suas engrenagens
technological
com sangue de
development
populações e territórios.
is based
E esse
on
é
the
talvez o maior
blood
desafio
of
desse
indigenous
multissetorialismo.
populations.
O tema de
So
fato precisa ser
perhaps
debatido
this
e eu
is
facilito essa
the
mesa porque,
greatest
mesmo no FIB,
challenge
a gente não
of
tem tido debates profundos sobre
multisectorialism.
multissetorialismo.
And we
Eu
should
lembro que o
have
último
a
grande
more
painel eu propus no FIB para discutir multissetorialismo de
important
setores em
debate.
2017. E a gente
I
sempre passa
remember in
muitos anos quando esse tema
2017,
volta à
I
baila.
proposed the
A gente
topic to
precisa
be
avançar,
discussed,
mas precisa ir à
and it's
raiz dos
been
processos
many years
deliberativos de
since
participação,
we addressed the
tornando-os
topic.
materialmente profundos e
So we
significativos.
have to
E aí eu
work
lembro de uma
more
fala da
on
professora
that.
Eliane Tarouco na
Then
EGM de
again,
2016,
Professor
a terceira
Liane
turma,
Talot
que ela disse que
in
nós não podemos esperar que isso
2016
caia do
said,
céu.
we
Nós precisamos
cannot
tomar o que é
wait
nosso.
for
Obrigado.
answers to come from the sky. We have to take control of our future.
Boa tarde a todos e todas.
Good
Sou Alexandre
afternoon,
Boava, do Núcleo de
everyone. I'm
Tecnologia do
Alexandre
MTST
Boava
e
from
também Conselheiro Nacional de
MTST
Proteção de
and
Dados.
also
Vou começar minha
National
fala, vai ser
Advisor of
rápido.
Data
A gente tem uma
Protection. I'm going to
definição e
be
uma
quick.
construção de uma
We
agenda
have a
que parte
definition
a partir da
of an
prática de soberania
agenda
digital
based
a
on the
partir do poder
practice of
popular.
digital
Essa perspectiva de
sovereignty
soberania digital,
based on
ela está
popular
a
power.
serviço da
This
construção do
is
poder popular
sovereignty
e os
that is
fatores
at the
desses
service
elementos
of
altera demais o
populations.
produto.
And,
Então, a primeira perspectiva que eu queria
this
trazer é que o
makes a
multissetorialismo,
huge
ele,
difference.
na sua natureza, ele
Multisectorialism,
já não
in
atende
its
a essa
nature,
perspectiva.
no
Porque não é uma
longer
perspectiva a partir dessa construção,
considers
ou
this
pelo menos do interesse da
perspective.
participação
It
popular. Eu entendo a
does not
relevância dele
consider
em alguns
popular
aspectos, em alguns
participation.
momentos.
I
E fazer
understand the
paralelo em
relevance
relação ao
of
multissetorialismo agora,
multisectorialism,
e
but we
talvez
cannot
uma
forget
crise maior em
this
relação
group
à norma
uh,
4 e o que a Anatel quer
for
fazer,
its
que a gente
construction.
talvez passou muito
And
tempo
perhaps,
querendo
when we
blindar o
address
multissetorialismo,
Norm
como
4,
se esse procedimento ele fosse o
perhaps we
adequado para
spent a
tentar as
long time
transformações e
to
os contornos
shield
da governança da internet que a gente tem hoje. E
multisectorialism,
eu acho que o apoio
considering it the best
político que
tool
há
that we
hoje,
have.
e
I think
porque a
that the
Anatel fez o
political
corre dela
support that is
político e ela está
needed,
se sentindo ameaçada,
Anatel
porque
is
o
feeling
prestígio dela,
threatened
dentro da nossa
because
percepção,
its
vem caindo.
prestige
Por
in
exemplo,
our
a
perception
ANPD
is
tomando
going down.
lugar como
NPD
o
is
possível
taking its
autoridade para
position as
falar
a possible
sobre
authority
inteligência
to
artificial, para
talk
tomar conta
about
da inteligência
artificial
artificial, e a Anatel
intelligence, to
perdeu essa
take
disputa.
care of
E ela vem na
artificial
canetada, e eu acho que não
intelligence.
parece ser
And
legítimo que a norma
Anatel
4
lost its
passe por
power.
uma
I
canetada da
don't think
Anatel.
that
Mas, de
Norm
qualquer
4
forma, o
is going
multissetorialismo
to
ele
be
não
passed
conseguiu
by
construir uma base
is going to be
política
knocked
e,
down
sobretudo,
by Anatel.
popular, para que
But
hoje o
multisectorialism
CGI
forgot
pudesse
to
ter
include
outros elementos que
the
não só o
general
seu próprio
population.
processo ou o que foi
And
vendido lá
today,
atrás como
all the resources that
um
the
arranjo
CGI
entre a
has
ONU
are its own resources, its own processes, supported by the UN and other stakeholders. We have to fix that. And just to close, my question is, what is the role of the general population, a general consultation for multisectorialism? And just for you to know, we are working with a manifest at agência FIB.nucleotecnologia-nota. I know it's a large name, but we can let you know later about that. But the idea is to address general people's participation to the table. I think multisectorialism is not the answer to all. Thank you very much.
Isso. Vou abrir para os nossos convidados. Quem quiser se manifestar, por favor. Bruna, você quer começar?
So who'd like to start answering these questions? I would like to start answering André's questions. That was a reminder during RoadNet plus 10. And we are not talking about one approach, but several ones which have to be improved. And the reason why I have highlighted both the role of youngsters and diversity, it's for, we have this multi approach as IGF has, and ICANN, multi-stakeholder at ICANN works totally different, where governors, they have a more limited action. So there is high time to revise and use IGF. I think it's high time we think about the position of multi-stakeholder and which are other players or actors that could participate, and what are the sort of restrictions that would like to place, and what are the drivers that would help us to guarantee more equality. At global areas, maybe tokenization is going to be easier. We see that there is a search for panelists from the global south, from any expertise, just to validate, you know, that regional differences obligation, but not exactly to learn more about the global south or our country north to south side. And as to the norm 4, I have the same, I agree. It's totally inappropriated the way as Anatel is trying to change the norm. There is a not proportional attempt of compliance to new topics of internet control in our agenda, and that is minimally inappropriated, and we have to understand how to discuss that topic. But I wish Anatel would do its homework and solve their internal problems, push funds, and so on.
Obrigado, Bruna. Jorge ou Carol, se quiserem, levantem a mão.
Jorge or Carol, raise your arms.
Não?
Acho que tem alguém levantado aqui, o Jorge.
Oi?
Jorge is willing to say something.
Muchas gracias. Espero que
Thank you.
Que me oigáis.
I hope you are all listening me all right. Well, briefly, without getting into a national discussion, as it is up to you to do that in Brazil, but yet I have two pieces of reflections. First, as Bruna said, a multi-stakeholder model from different parts is not an ended or monolithic model, but just a type of insight which should be adapted and understood in accordance to the different times. And the WorldNet plus 10 was a way to adapt to the new geopolitical realities, to the new digital world innovations, and also the possibility to take into account the asymmetries of the power of capacities among all those players. And also there is a need to inspire and to transform all the multi-stakeholder spheres with the help of what is being developed at the multi-stakeholder, but we should apply that globally as well. But talking about Switzerland, the country where I live at and to whom I work for and to which I work for, we had for many times a governmental initiative to define a digital identity. And that was a governmental initiative of a traditional mode with all the participation system available in Switzerland, but which was not effective, a multi-sectorial deep process where we would be able to hear to all interested parts. In Switzerland, there were many citizens who were not in favor of this initiative, and during a people's referendum, a popular referendum, citizens, they had to vote, and digital identity model was rejected as it was not developed in an inclusive manner. Therefore, it was thought that it would not be something that would benefit overall citizens. After that, state model was never got back, and rather they try a more multi-stakeholder, multi-sectorial model where we had a chance to listen, to make some consultation, and together we develop a model, which would be of public digital interesting. Once again, there are people who are not in favor of this model, and we are going to have an opportunity by next fall to go through a new referendum about the model. What do I mean by that? If a multi-stakeholder model has its weakness, the answer is to go deep, even more, to make that more real, similar to democracy. Democracy is a process, an endless inclusion process of more sectors and more parts of the population that didn't have enough participation so far. That's very similar to the emphasis that we give globally. Thank you.
Você quer falar alguma coisa, Cides? Sim, por favor. Vocês mandam.
Opa, vamos lá, que eu não sei se a Carol queria falar, mas enfim, eu falo aqui. Excelentes manifestações. Ale, eu concordo muito com você.
Wonderful comments. And I do agree with the creation and amplification of popular drivers. I think there is much more to be discussed and some global room for that. André, I like when you say...
Eu acredito que é Flávia porque eu tive em outro painel. Eu acho que suas manifestações são sempre boas e nos ajudam.
Flávia, you always make very timely comments. Thank you. I don't know anything about fairness, legality, but I can identify geopolitical intentions. On a dimension like that, we believe that this is just taking place in Brazil, the way as they centralize or the removal of norm number 4. But that is taking place all over different countries. They are experiencing the same thing and they are getting attacks from the American status, such as Mike Rubin said, that is going to get the visa of those members that will go after the Americans or go against the Americans. And the radical right, and here I'm not talking about actors, but more popular ones such as Liblatis and Levitas, who discuss the idea as how movements like that will operate, things that might not make sense to the regular citizens, but they are leading to a hyper-centralization. And from centralization is much easier to reach a more advanced stage. So I don't understand about the legal matters, but I understand about this movement and how they are relevant for the maintenance of stability and social welfare. So I don't see this movement as being something inside out, but also with the involvement of a number of other players. Thank you.
Por favor.
Boa tarde.
Good afternoon.
Carol, desculpa. Já passo para você. Carol, por favor.
Rafael, quer seguir? Depois eu comento tudo?
Would you like to go on and then I make my final comments? If you prefer, you may comment right now. Okay, I'll briefly give my 2 cents. Much has already been said, but Anatel, the telco, has today a very relevant role as to telecommunication services.
Colocar fibra no país todo, a questão
to spread of optical fiber all over the country. So Anatel has a relevant role to be executed in that sense, in that manner. But let's point out that there is a role that is being played, but is also a society role to collaborate and to be vigilant. As to internet, Anatel does not have a role related to the internet by law or from a internet regulatory aspect. As Flavia has well said, the regulatory aspect from telco to internet, fine, but to regulate internet, no.
Falou da questão do multissetorialismo não exaurir.
Someone mentioned the multi-stakeholder, not to exceed popular presence. And I agree when he says so. Third sector users, they have to occupy that space, talking to their congressmen, to their governors, thanks to a list of signature and some other drivers that will show to opinion leaders and legislators about their vision, their opinion. And I did not see that being filled up by something else. We know that the power works for our people, and our people, they also have to work to address their feelings, even if they go through a petition. Multi-stakeholder is not going to be able to encompass all opinions, and how all these opinions may be directly addressed, as it was said here that we have a constant ongoing democracy. Thank you. Thank you, Carol.
Nós só temos 6 minutos agora.
We have just 6 minutes left and 2 people queuing up. So please brief.
É a Renata que está atrás? Não, Renata, você pode falar quanto você quiser. E aí depois eu passo para todo mundo para as palavras finais.
And after those 2 questions, let's have a quick round of closing remarks. Hello, I am from CGI Youth Delegation. I would like to go back to Digital Global Pact. I don't know if you're going to have time to answer, but what does that Global Pact represent to the multi-stakeholder, as we have not reached our expectations? like 2005, and on a year where we are going to renew that IGF contract, what are the future tracks? What are the renew ways so the civil society as a category may be a representative, a legitimate representative of our society? I mean, people that are consumers, that render services, that sometimes don't have the fantasy idea as how the multi-stakeholder model is constructed and organized. My question goes along the same lines. Jorge, hello. Carol, how are you? And I also like to greet all panelists. Bruna mentioned in her intervention about this permanent stress between multi-stakeholder multilateralisms. And we have a permanent stress even within the multilateral environment and multi-stakeholder, as the idea that multi-stakeholder will be able to represent the whole universe of social demands. That is just impossible. I wish we could, but we have restraints. How can we increase and improve all these possibilities? But that will never be 100% real. But that is a procedure that may become more feasible. A way to find or to understand where all the society demands are, and within the multilateralism we have a stress between countries that have a more international geopolitical power and those who are under some submission of this international system. And in that sense, at CGI and +10 Net Mundial, we are currently and continuously addressing all these matters. And I would like to hear from all of you, especially Jorge and Bruna, who are following and up to date to the international process. What is your insight about the discussion of the renewal process of information society International Summit, and is it possible to harmonize or maybe to face a fake dichotomy between each one of those terminologies, multilateralism and multi-stakeholder, as we did during +10 Net Mundial? What is the participation role of each one of them in face of digital topics? Thank you. Thank you, Renata. I will ask you not to exceed 1 minute, please, because our time is up, and your final considerations.
Passando por todos, e aí vou fazer no sentido contrário. Então, começando pelo Alcides, por favor.
Oi, pessoal. Bom, eu vou fazer desse minuto final aqui os meus agradecimentos novamente, né, por todo o apoio do CGI.
In this final moment, I'm going to thank you, thank the manifestations. I've always been a pessimist many times. And when you think of multi-sectorialism, multilateralism, I think of an embryo for a future that is possible. So I look at this and I would say that there are things happening. To answer Renata, there is room for growth, but in what we see today, keeping this is a way to resist what is to come. We have several unseen global manifestations. So I think we have to take the trouble. I think that we have to admit we are living a moment of exception, and we have to try and survive the moment. I thank once again for your patience. Thanks, Alcides. Carol?
Por favor.
Eu quero agradecer,
I would like to
enaltecer o
thank, and
multissetorialismo, a
again, I
governança
am
e
all in
convocar
favor of
todos a se manifestarem
multisectorialism,
através do
governance,
ECG,
and
através dos canais
please
diretos
contact
e empoderando todos os pleitos
ACG
aí que
direct
entendem
channels,
necessários para a
and
internet
let's
evoluir.
try
Contem
and
conosco
have everything that
e
is
parabéns
necessary
mais uma
for
vez,
the
bom
internet
evento,
to
obrigada
evolve.
pelo
You can
convite.
count on us. I thank the invitation and congratulations again for
Eugênio?
such an interesting event. Eugênio? Thanks again. I'd like to thank the invitation and also say that multisectoralism and internet governance are very relevant and strategic. Internet is a classical example of global good and collaboration in between sectors. So it was an honor to be part of this panel, and I learned a lot, and thank you very much.
Bruna, por favor.
Bruna?
Só as duas
Thank
perguntas. Acho que
you.
o GTC não mostrou
I
como processo ou
think
foi uma
GPT, what
tentativa
it
de discussão de espaços mais
meant as a
democráticos de discussão
process,
como já é
it
feito
was
em
an
torno de centros de
attempt
poder que são mais
to
exclusivos e mais
talk about
concentrados como os Estados Unidos.
power
É um dos
centers that are
fatores desse
more
processo, acima de
concentrated
tudo.
like the
E
United
com relação
States.
às guidelines, que
And
deixa eu
as
pegar uma
for
ideia, eu acho que elas são um
guidelines,
caminho,
I
ou um dos
think
caminhos
they are
para a
one
evolução das
of the
abordagens em torno
directions
do
for us to
multilateralismo, né?
evolve in
Porque elas exigem que os atores não
multisectorialism.
só assumam suas
And
responsabilidades, mas
they
também
demand
defendam
stakeholders not
fatores como
only to take
transparência e também lutem
positions, but
contra a
also
assimetria de poder.
defend
Então, eu vejo as
transparency
guidelines como
and
esse caminho para o futuro,
fight the
talvez.
concentration of power. So I see them as the future. Thanks, Bruna.
Jorge, por favor.
Jorge?
Muchas gracias.
I
Seré
thank
breve.
you.
El modelo
I
multisectorial es
think
un
the
proceso, es un camino
multisectoral
que se hace al
model
andar,
is a
como
way
decía aquel
that
poeta
makes
Antonio
us
Machado.
move.
No hay camino, sino se hace camino al
I think
andar.
the poet
Y
says
podemos
there
profundizar
are
este
ways that
modelo
we
todos
have
juntos. Yo creo que Brasil tiene un
to
papel fundamental
follow, and we
en
have
las
to
negociaciones y las
enhance the model
conversaciones
together. And I
internacionales,
think
también
Brazil
nacionales,
has a
claro,
key
que
role
tenemos
in
este año
international
y esperamos
conversations and
poder seguir
national
profundizando
conversations
en
that
este
we are going
modelo
to have
que es
this year.
complementario del
And
multilateral
somehow we want to
juntos
enhance
en
this
los siguientes
model
meses.
that is a complement to the multilateral model. So thank you very much
Gente,
for inviting me.
Fiquei com vontade de comentar várias das
Well,
questões,
I
mas eu não
wanted
pude
to
fazer isso
comment
porque eu queria dar
many
mais
of
as palavras
the
para todos, mas
questions.
eu
I
queria só fazer um
couldn't
comentário
because I
breve
wanted to
e um comentário
give
que eu
you all an
faço não como
opportunity to
conselheiro
talk,
do
and I'm
CGI
going
e
to
nem
make a
como
brief
CGI.
comment,
Falo
not
como uma
as a
pessoa que tem
CGI
convivido com
advisor
isso
or
já há
as
4
CGI.
anos,
I'm
4
talking
anos e
about
pouco.
a
O
person that
CGI
has lived with this for four
tem
and a
suas
half years.
limitações do que ele pode
CGI has
fazer.
its limitations.
E pelo multissetorialismo. E são
In
limitações que têm a ver
terms
com o
of,
seu papel de dar
fighting for
diretrizes,
multi-sectorialism,
princípios e a
because
sua
it has
capacidade de
other
renovar a
roles
sua
to
própria
establish
governança.
guidelines, principles,
Ao
and
mesmo tempo,
governance.
é da nossa
At the
vontade, aí
same
é da minha
time,
vontade,
I
colaborar com
would
ampliar o
love
máximo
to
possível esses
collaborate
espaços
and
e oferecer o
expand
máximo de estrutura para a gente conseguir
the
aprofundar a
structure
democratização
for us to
do
deepen
multissetorialismo. E eu acho que
democratization
aprofundar a
of
democratização do multissetorialismo,
multi-sectorialism.
como disseram
And
por aqui,
by
é
doing so,
essencial para justamente
as it
dar
was mentioned
legitimidade para as
by
instituições
many,
multissetoriais.
we
Acho que a
can
discussão sobre
give legitimacy
legitimidade é
to
importantíssima.
multi-sectorial institutions. Talking
Ela é
about
solidificada
legitimacy is
em
very important.
leis, em
And
decretos,
legitimacy
etc.
comes
Mas a
from
legitimidade, de
laws,
fato, se dá com a
decrees,
comunidade se
but
sentindo
mostly
representada,
when the
tendo o seu
community
espaço e
feels
conseguindo participar e ajudando a
represented, when
sustentar
the community feels
essas
it has a
instituições. Acho
voice
que é
and
isso.
it is helping
Falaria mais
support
nesse
to the
tempo, mas não vou falar.
institutions.
Obrigado a
I
todos
could
vocês
say
por
more
estarem
if I
aqui com a
have the
gente.
time, but I don't, so I just thank you for being with us today.
Obrigado.